Hi, chemistry class. Here is your lecture for Tuesday, January 12th. And today we're going to cover electron configurations and how you can read them from the periodic table. So you're definitely going to need your your full-blown periodic table to do today's lesson. So please get that out if you don't already have it out. And hopefully you have labeled your good periodic table. You've written down the groups there at the top, right? The 1A, the 2A, the 1A, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the Roman numerals here up at the top, right? And those are your group numbers. And then you put your periods here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the left. And also put your valence electrons up on the top of each group. One electron, one valence electron in group 1, 2 electrons in group 2, etc. Right? The group tells you the number of electrons. Group 7 has 7 electrons. Group 8 has 8 valence electrons. You're going to use this picture a lot. So I want to take you back to electron configuration from the last unit. Right? We introduced the idea of a bubble chart like we have here on the right, and we could come in here, and it was a way for us to quickly come up with the shorthand to show how many electrons are in each orbital. All right, we used this bubble chart, and then we came out and we started writing out some numbers and letters to show what the electron configuration was. And so what we would do here, for example, like if I asked you to do nitrogen, you'd come in here and we'd say, okay, nitrogen, we look at the periodic table, we'll see it has 7 electrons. So we're going to put 1 electron here, right? Second electron. Remember, each orbital can hold 2. And now we fill that orbital, so we're going to go up here. Our third electron is going to go in here. Our fourth electron is going to go in here. Now that we have our 2p, we put 1 electron in at a time. Right? We don't double them up. They don't want to share. So that's our 5th electron, our 6th electron, and our 7th electron. Right? And then what we would do, we say, what was our electron configuration here? We said this was a 1s2, a 2s. Sorry, guys, this is a little hard to write with this screen. A 2s2, and then finally 2p3. Right? It makes it like a middle order. Yeah, finally 2p3. So 1s2, 2s2, 2p3. We just read them right off of our table. All right. Now, if I wanted to do hydrogen or helium, rather, I mean, we could do the same kind of thing. We could come back here and look at helium. And if we're going to do helium, let me erase what I did over here before. Right, helium, we look at our periodic table, and we see helium's got 2 electrons. Boom, boom. There's our 2 electrons. Again, we read off our configuration, 1s, and there's 2 electrons in the 1s level for us. Now, we're going to see a pattern here. And this is what's nice when we have the periodic table structured the way we do. It shows those patterns. These patterns just fall right out for us. Okay. There's going to be a few exceptions. I don't want you to worry too much about them. I'll explain the one that I really do want you to work. I want to explain the one that we will see a bit, but the rest I don't want you to worry about. I won't even tell you about them. All right. So the way the periodic table is organized, there are s blocks, p blocks, and d blocks, right? So we have our s, p, d orbitals here. We have s, p, and d blocks on our periodic table. If you look at this version of the periodic table here I have, right, the left 2 groups, left 2 columns, those are where our s blocks go. That's where the s block goes. That's where we're going to fill our s orbital on our periodic table. That middle group there, that d in green, that's where we're filling up our d orbital. Our purple or pinkish block there on the right, then, that's our p block on our periodic table. Now, I do want you to notice up in the top right there, hydrogen, or helium rather, there is in blue. It really is an s orbital. And for the purposes of what we're doing here, it would have been nice if we had helium right next to hydrogen on the left-hand side of the table. But there are so many different uses of the periodic table. We all had to choose which position we wanted to put helium in for the most useful, or for the most times we would use it, the most different ways we'd use it, and it ended up being on the right. But for the purposes of electron configuration, it really should be on the left over there, in that left with the rest of the blue columns there. Okay. So we have an S, P, and a D region on our periodic table. Now, not only do we have the SPD blocks, the periodic table also has the levels, right? The period will tell you the energy level. So we look at our bubble chart here, right? We've got, if I get my mouse to work for me, We've got the 1 here, the 2 here. Let me see if I can change this. This might be nice. We've got a 1s. We got a 1s level, 2s level, right? 2p. So there's these 2s or 1s and 2s there. They're telling you the energy level. But those periods, those 1s at 2s at 3s, etc., that falls on the periods on the periodic table. Right? That falls like periods on our periodic table here. Right? Period 1. Whoop, get my mouse back where I want it. Period 1, period 2, period 3. So those correspond to energy levels. Okay. So now I want to show you kind of, I'm going to take the shape of the periodic table. I'm going to take away some of the stuff in the background so it doesn't get hard to see. But I want you to see how this is all going to work together. So the first thing we're going to do here, I want you to draw in, right, on your notes here. This is the 1s, right? This is the first row. It's in our blue area here. This is a 1s. Unfortunately, helium, our little exception, that's also a 1s. Down here, now we're in group 2. I'm sorry, period 2. Period 2, it tells us our energy level 2, or in the blue part here, that's our 2, and the s block. So this is our 2s. This is where we're filling up our 2s electrons. Keep going to the right, we get to this green area. This is where we're filling up our p block of our electrons. This is where we're in our period 2, energy level 2, and we're in the p block. And then energy level 3, we're in the s block over here on the left. And we're going to go over here to the right, we have a 3p. And we can keep going, and we have a 4s. Well, now it's going to get a little more complicated, and I want to show you how the periodic table structure here reflects what we did earlier with our bubble charts. So what I want you to see when you looked at your bubble chart, what did we see over here? Right, you had the 1s. Well, here's what we see on our periodic table. We start with our 1s. There's our 1s first electron, 1s second electron. Next thing on your bubble chart, you see the 2s. Well, if we read our periodic table like a book from left to right, just like you start at the top, and lead left to right, we're gonna have 1s1, 1s2. Well, that fills up what we see here on our bubble chart. What do we see next as we read, excuse me, left to right on our periodic table? Now we see 2s1 and 2s2. Well, that's what's next on our that's what's next on our bubble chart here, right? The 2s1 and 2 are the next ones to show up. Well, after the 2s comes our 2p on our periodic table. Look at our bubble chart. Same thing here. Now after our 2s comes our 2p. What comes after your 2p? Well, if you look at your periodic table, we're going to come down to our next row. 3s. Look at your bubble chart. It has a 3s here as well. After the 3s comes the 3p. Yep, there's the 3p over here on our bubble chart. After our 3p, go down to the next row, 4s. Awesome. That's what shows up on our bubble chart. But here's where it gets a little weird. We talked about this before. The 3d got pushed up. Or rather, I should say the 4s got pulled down. So it's now below the 3d and energy level. And we said that we didn't need to worry about that too much in our bubble chart because our bubble chart already had things in the right order. Well, so does the periodic table. So just like our bubble chart, after 4s here comes a 3d, same with your periodic table. After you've gone through your 4s, now you're going to come into your 3d. Your 3d. What follows after your 3d? Well, we're going to back over here in our p level. We're in group 4, period 4. This is going to be our 4p. Same thing with your bubble chart. We go 4s, 3d, and then we're back to 4p. So our periodic table takes this repeating pattern that we saw in our bubble chart and puts it into a structure on a periodic table so we can really easily read where we are. Are we in the left in the blue area? We're in the S block. Are we in the middle? We're in the yellow area. We're in a D block. Or are we in the right and we're in a green area and we're in a P block? So the only other thing to show you here, and I want to be really, really careful because your bubble chart does this nicely for you because it has everything ordered. Your periodic table does too, but it's going to be a little tricky. So what I want you to see here is that even though this is group 4, period 4 rather, all right, period 1, we have all 1s, period 2, all 2s, period 3, all 3s. Period 4, when we get to our S's, the S is still 4S, P is still 4P, but our D, instead of being 4, it's not a 4D, it's a 3D. Our D's got pushed down a row on our periodic table. Our D's got pushed down a row. So just to make sure you don't put that 4D here, that's not a 4D. Our 4D is down one below. So we do 4s, 3d, 4p, just like our bubble chart. 4s, 3d, 4p. What's next on your periodic table? 5s. What comes after 4p in your bubble chart? 5s. On your bubble chart, after the 5s comes the 4d. Great. Same thing with the periodic table. After our 5s comes our 4d. And after our 4d, keep going to the right. We're group 5 here. This is our 5d, and that's what our periodic table says. 5p. Our periodic table, our bubble chart says the same thing. After 4d comes 5p. And after 5p, it's 6s in your bubble chart, and it's 6s on the periodic table. So what I want you to see here is on the periodic table, it's pretty easy. You just look at it. We have S blocks on the left, P blocks on the right, D blocks in the middle. The period tells you your energy level, except for your Ds. Except for your Ds. Your Ds are all pushed down one. So even though this area here, we're in period 4, it's not our 4D, it's our 3D. So just remember your Ds got pushed down a level, pushed down a row. I want you to draw this on your nice periodic table. Right? Put a kind of a block around the left-hand side there over the left 2 columns and put an S above it. On the right 6 columns there, put a P above that. And in the middle 10 columns there, put a D. So now your nice version of your periodic table has a lot of information on it. And now it tells you what blocks you are in as well. So it has our groups, our periods, has our valence electrons at the top, and it also shows us where our S, P, and D blocks are on our periodic table. So all this makes it, where am I going with all this? All this makes it really easy. We can read off right from the periodic table what the electron configuration is. We don't need a bubble chart anymore. Oh, sorry, one more thing there. The 3D and the 4Ds, remember, they got pushed down a level. And then for anybody who's curious, that very bottom part there, our rare earths, that's where we're filling in our F blocks, our F orbitals. But we won't go that far. We can look at our periodic table, and in your notes here, you'll see we can read the electron configuration from the left to the right, just like a book. Just like a book. Okay, so let's do a few examples. Well, I've got this periodic table above us here on the screen. Let's see if I get it all to fit. Yeah, okay, well, let's look at sodium. Sodium, we're going to find sodium. Sodium's up here at Na. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit so I can get everything on the screen. Yeah, there we go. So we look for sodium. So let's just read off what its electron configuration is. So we're going to start like a book. Start at the top left. We read off. What do we have here? 1s1, 1s2. So we have our beginning here, 1s2. We finished our first row, our first period on our periodic table. So like a book, we're going to come down to the second line in our book. What do we have here? This is the 2, level 2. This is our S. So we're going to have our 2s. There's your 1 and your 2 there for your lithium and your beryllium. So we have 2s2. Keep going across that row. What do we see? The next thing we come across is our P level here. Now remember our P, this is row 2 we're in. So this is going to be our 2p level. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 electrons in there. So we're going to come up with a 2p6. And now we're going to go back to our third level. There's sodium. It's our first box here. What is that? That's our period 3. So it's our energy level 3. And it is our S level. And there's only 1 electron in there. Right, so we can read it right off the periodic table. We can read it right off the periodic table. Well, let's do the next one here. Let's do chromium. Chromium's a little bit bigger here. So let's say find chromium on a periodic table. There we go, right here. It's element number 24. So we're going to do the same kind of thing. Let's read it off like we were reading a book. We're going to start at the top. What do we have at the top? We have our 1s1, our 1s2. Good. So our chromium's going to start off with 1s2. So much like you saw with your bubble charts, everything starts off with that 1s, and you get 2 electrons in, and you go up, So there's a pattern. It adds on every time you go up to a new element. Well, that's our first line in our periodic table. Let's go to the second one. Again, what do we have here in our second one? We have our 2s, and there's both electrons are in there. We keep going across that second row. We come to our 2p, right? And it has all 6 of its electrons, 2p6. We're still going. We haven't gotten to chromium. Come down to level 3, next record. the next row on our periodic table. 3, we have our 3s1 and 3s2 here. So let's put our 3s1, 3s2 in. Keep going across the periodic table, same row. You have our 3 P's here. All 6 of them are in there. Come down here to our next row, still trying to get to chromium. We have our 4. We have both of our S's here, so we're going to put our 4s2. And then finally, where are we at now? Remember, this is a 3D, right? Our D's got pushed down a level, so we're in 3D. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we got 4 electrons there in our 3D, and then we're going to finish our configuration that way. So we don't need a bubble chart anymore. Just look at your periodic table, start reading it top to bottom, left to right. Okay. Let's do a couple more of these here. Sulfur. Sulfur is element 16. Let's put a different color so you can see what I'm doing. Sulfur is element 16. So let's go ahead and do it. Read it from what are we doing? We have group 1, period 1. We have our 1s1 and 1s2. So let's go down here. Let's give us our 1s2. We're going to go to period 2. 2s1, 2s2. We have all 6 of our 2p's, so we're going to have our 2s2 and our 2p6. Come down to our third row here, 3s. We have both of those, so there's the 3s2. And now we're in our 3p. But sulfur's in here, so we have 3p. 1, 2, 3, 4 electrons in there. 3p4. I'm going to skip over bromine for a moment. Well, I'm just going to kind of go through bromine. Now, you notice they're always going to start the same. If you compare our bromine to our chromium, all the full levels are the same, right? 1s2, 2s2, 2p6, 3s2, 3p6, 4s2. Those are all the same here. Well, if we look at bromium, it went a little bit farther than our chromium did. Chromium still is in period 4. But by the time to get to bromine, we filled our 3D here. There's 10 electrons in our 3D, and we're starting into our 4p. How far in? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4p5. So the beginning's always going to be the same. Every full shell is going to be the same, and you're going to keep going, and we just keep building them up, and then we add another layer as we go. Awesome. Beryllium's really easy, right? Beryllium here is element number 4, right? So it's got its 1s. 1s1, 1s2. Now in our 2s's, and we got both electrons, we hit our beryllium. Beryllium's real simple, simply 1s2, 2s2. Zirconium's going to be a really long one. Right, here's where zirconium is over here. Let's go. Right, so what I want you to see here, it's going to be similar to bromine. Right, bromine was one row above it, so we can almost start with our bromine when we're looking at doing our zirconium. So I'm going to go over there and do all the full rows from our bromine, 3D. But as whereas bromine did not fill our 4p, we're looking for zirconium. We do, so we have our 4p6. Let's keep going down. We've finished that row. Come down to the next row. We're at row 5 here. We've got 5s1, 5s2. And what follows our 5s2? It's our 4d here. Remember, the D's got pushed down, and zirconium is in the second position, 4d2. All right. So it's pretty easy. You guys look at the periodic table. We know we have S blocks. We know we have P blocks. We know we have D blocks. And because once we know what those blocks are, and then we remember that the D blocks are pushed down once, even though it's in period 4, it's the 3D block, then we're easy. We can read them right off. Hopefully that makes enough sense as we go through there. We'll do some more practice here in the worksheet at the end of the period. Now, what I want to show you here is kind of a shorthand, if you will, on how we can identify an element. So what I was just showing here a moment ago, right, we had this really long electron configuration. It took a long time, a lot of stuff there to write out for zirconium, for example. It's a long string of numbers and letters. But we can do this in a shorthand way. What is our rule here for our shorthand way? All we have to do is write down the last part of the electron configuration, that last shell that it's filling, that last energy level that it's over those last orbitals that it's filling. So if we look at calcium, if we wanted to find calcium on our periodic table here, we wanted to read it off, right? Where is calcium? Calcium is right here. It's in our period 4. So we could read it off. It's 1s2. We've got to read our first row. 2s2, 2p6 from our second row. Third row is 3s2, 3p6. We finally get down to our fourth row, 4s1, and we're in our S level here, 4s1, 4s2. So the last thing we saw in our calcium here was 4s2. Well, that's all we need to, we can just simply write that here. Calcium is the only one that ends in 4s2. Right? All the stuff before that's the same as any other element up to that point. Right? So calcium is going to start that same way. If we look over one to the scandium, it's going to start the same way as the calcium. Just how's it different from calcium? It has a 3D1 in it. So all you got to do now, guys, if I want you to find the shorthand, find your element in the periodic table. What row is it in? What period is it in? And then what block? Is it an S, a P, or a D block? And if it's an S or a P block, just read your row number, your period number, and then what's your block number, and then how many electrons you have in your block. We're in period 4 here for our calcium. We're in the S block, and we have 2 electrons in it. So if we look at nickel, right, here's nickel. Nickel's over here, element 28. It's in our it's in this middle of our periodic table here. So where are we at here? We're in the 4th period, but we're in a D block. Remember, our D blocks are, we have to subtract 1. So this is our 3D. How far in are we for nickel? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So nickel, we can just simply say is 3D 8. Okay. If we wanted to say, for example, copper would be 3D 9. Because it's got 1 more electron. So just that last little bit, that'll uniquely identify every element for us. So hopefully you guys can look and see bromine. Our last one here, what row are we in? We're in row 1, 2, 3, 4 for bromine. We're in the P section. How far into that P section are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we are in a 4p5 when we talk about our bromine. Okay, much easier. You don't have to go counting all that stuff like we've been doing, but you have to know that background for this part here to make sense. Now, just like we can find the element and then we just have to write down the last part of its notation, we can go backwards too. We can do it the other way around. If I give you the shorthand, you should be able to tell me the element. So what if I ask you what element is 2p3? Well, you're going to go and you're going to find the P block, and you're going to look in period 2. So we know we're here in this section here that begins with boron. How far in are we? 1, 2, 3. Boron's 1, carbon's 2, nitrogen's 3. So 2p3 corresponds to nitrogen. Let's do our next one, 5p5. Let's find our 5p. We'll stay in our P block. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here's our P block is over here. Let me get my highlighter back. Our 5p block is over here. How far in are we? 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to be iodine. And then let's look at our last one here, 4d2. Remember our D's, they're pushed down once. We've got to look at row 5. So we're looking at row 5. Here's where our 4 D's are. There's our first element. There's our second element. This is going to be zirconium. So I can give you a shorthand, and you give me the element. I give you the element, you give me the shorthand. That finishes our notes for today. Please take some time to do that practice worksheet that follows in today's folder. Don't forget to do your lecture notes quiz today. And because this is a short week, Friday, it's School Friday, Thursday is when we're going to have our quiz over our new topics this week. So Thursday we have our quiz, and then that'll be the last quiz for this unit, because next Friday will be our unit test on this unit. Hope this makes sense, guys. If it doesn't, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to work with you a little bit more to help this click. It's not too hard. It's not too hard. A little bit of practice, you should get there. All right. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.